Dr. Medha Patkar is an Indian social activist and land rights advocate. She is the founding member of the Narmada Bachao Andolan movement and founding advisor to the National Alliance of People's Movements. She addresses issues such as casteism and discrimination, as well as the Nandigram land grab resistance. So without further ado, it is our distinguished pleasure of welcoming Dr. Medha Patkar here to join us today.
Thank you, Abhirami. Respected Justice C.V. Vigneshwaran and all the eminent panelists, including my friend Anuradha Mittal, meeting after a long time online. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to share the heartfelt views on the land grab in the country like Sri Lanka. I know that the 3-decade civil war that the Tamilians in Sri Lanka faced was a horrifying experience. And when that was a result of the long-faced discrimination, which was ethnic discrimination, no doubt, but had the grave political colors and reasonings. It is definitely unacceptable that even after the LTTE war ended in 2009, that the land grab, which was there during the absolutely militarized processes before 2009, is continuing even years after, or a decade after the end of war. And hence, this kind of approach by any government in any nation state, it's certainly highly condemnable. The grabbing of land is not just land, it is grabbing of the social, cultural heritage and the traditions, as well as the sources of livelihood, as everyone knows it. And hence, this kind of land grab, which was there for establishing military camps, now getting converted into establishing tourism projects or even eateries and all kinds of non-military occupations, is something that is inhuman and also undemocratic. It is undemocratic because whether in Sri Lanka or in the country like India, when the communities who have been living there since generations are not even consulted, when the land use needs to be changed under any disguise, it is absolutely against the democratic process. And also the due processes of law are not followed. We have heard a lot from the affected Tamilians when I visited Tamil Nadu in India, and also when I visited Sri Lanka, especially the Mahaveli River Valley project, that they were absolutely treated violently. This violence is the state violence, whether it is through the military or otherwise. Of course, we are a non-violent people's movement and the alliance of non-violent people's movements. And hence in India, we resort to the non-violent satyagraha, the non-violent tool, not weapon, that Mahatma Gandhi left behind for us. And it is necessary, therefore, to say that LTTE's war was not really praised by us, but we understand that the discrimination leads to violence, and now it is displacement, which is also accompanied by deprivation and destitution, that is continuing to be the reason behind the violent assaults on the communities. Whether in Jaffna or Mannar district, wherever the Navy, after the Rajapaksa government came to power, had promised that they would return the land, they have not done so. So one cannot expect that once the land and everything attached to land, as the British said in terms of the Indian law of then, which was of 1894. That land and everything attached to land is being grabbed. One cannot say it can be a repairable loss. One cannot believe that reparation will take place. One cannot expect the government and its various kinds of forces would really return back to them even after the particular purpose is served, if at all it is temporary purpose. But we know and have heard umpteen number of stories, especially since 2017 or 2014 onwards also, that the land grab has taken place, cheating the people living there, and for no reason but for profit over people, as Noam Chomsky has called it. But what are the different impacts? Those are brought out by the Human Rights Watch and the various researchers, including Anuradha ji and others, Meenakshi Ganguly from India and others. And that has really enforced or reinforced our conclusions about any land grab. Now that grab may be called as land acquisition, as a legal process. But one knows that even before acquisition, the real status of land, the status of the communities, their dependence on the natural resource ecosystem and the socio-cultural linkages with the land and the natural resources is never taken into consideration to the fullest possible extent. Now, the particularly more affected sections of populations, such as the Dalits in the caste hierarchy, or the women who face cumulative injustice, cumulative inequity, are certainly bypassed. And many sections that are living on the fishing, for example, are also not taken into consideration. This is our experience in India as well. The Tata Mundra project, which had the World Bank institution against the laws of the land, and that project in the state of Gujarat in India affected 10,000 fishing population, but did not take them into consideration, while claiming that they are going to compensate the losses and are going to attain resettlement, but also rehabilitation. Now, this kind of claims and promises go haywire when the project takes a status of fait accompli. And then one has to fight the battle at every democratic fora. And when we remain non-violent, we remain democratic, we follow the law of the land. The experience from the Sri Lankan military massive land grab, like in the place of called Kalpitia, where 1,474 people approach the judiciary, we realize that there is no such proper process of planning, leave aside democratic, not even scientific. And then the impacts become inevitable. Now, the social and environmental impacts certainly need to be taken into consideration, but that is not expected of the grab, which is a military grab, because that is based on the inhuman physical force, armed forces. And whenever that happens, even in India, in the place of Mahu, which is considered as the birthplace of Baba Saheb Ambedkar, the forefather of our constitution of India. And there also the land was grabbed, and our colleague in the Narmada movement has done the research to show how it was all done with full of illegalities and irregularities. Same was to happen in the Narmada Valley also, where a development project so-called was planned, but still the land acquisition law also was not properly adopted. Take the examples of those who were evicted in 1961 for the project colony. So it is the people's movement, non-violent Satyagrahi movement for last 36 years that we had to take forward and achieve the rehabilitation with alternative land to the landholders and also their major sons, women landholders, joint landholders, from the Supreme Court and other court judgments, but also the massive struggles. Now, this was not possible in Sri Lanka, I understand, because there was a long history of the Tamil Elam, and later it got converted into a military force, and also the struggle which became violent under the leadership of Mr. Prabhakaran. So the common people, the Tamilians who face discrimination over years and decades, cannot mobilize themselves, could not mobilize themselves that effectively to take up these struggles such as one in India. But I know that the legal and social battles are still being fought, and that is a must. Because we know now that all over the world, land has become gold. And it is no more a source of livelihood. It no more a life supporting resource. Because when the land is taken over, the water streams to water bodies, to rivers, everything also comes to be occupied. And that cumulative occupation by any force, whether it is military force or by the government concerned, is generally pushed in the name of public interest. Now, what is public interest and what is public purpose needs to be questioned, because the development paradigm in the present world is no more truly progressive. It is no more equitable, and it is no more sustainable. So not just directly affected, but their intergenerational conflict with them really affects families, communities, and also the natural resources. Today, when hundreds of thousands, millions have died all over the world without the appropriate treatment for the coronavirus and the pandemic, where oxygen was the most required element in the country like India, we know that while we are destroying the green cover on the land, which existed not in the military camps, but the communities which had the saving today between the nature and the people dependent on it. And yet, even after and during the pandemic, the same kind of destructive measures are adopted, called as developmental measures and projects and plans, which we must really not just ignore or neglect, but we must really declare as unacceptable to us when we have the value framework of equity and justice. We know that when the public purpose gets ill-defined and it is equated with business and ease of doing business kind of principles and policies come into being, there is a huge global market, and the global investors forces through the international financial institutions and the corporates that also play a role, because the politicians and such corporates and the corporate based United Nations fora also play a very, very anti-human and anti-people role. And we know that there are many conventions and covenants passed in the United Nations and signed and ratified by our governments, such as the Convention of on the Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, or related to the indigenous communities, but those are also not followed. So leave aside the laws of the land, even the global kind of framework of policies and manuals are not followed, considering each of the institution which is considered as financial institution, neither social nor economic nor political. And that is what is happening in Sri Lanka also, whatever I as understand with the limited knowledge of it. When you had a policy for the involuntary resettlement, when you had a clear kind of policy for the conflict affected populations. So that is what I feel is the experience of how the policies and laws go against the constitution, which has a better golden value framework. So all the politicians who take an oath, keeping their hands on the constitution, whether in India or other nation states, we realize do not care even to have a dialogue with the people, leave aside resolution of the conflict. And hence, we must really not just appeal to the government concerned, because your latest government also has left behind the minimum hope that we had when the Rajapaksa government declared that the return of the populations affected by the military conflict would be supported and the land would also be recovered by them. But when that was not taking place then, it is today, there is very little hope from the government, but yet we as international forum and activists must really now resort to the globalization strategies which are adopted by the corporates and the governments. But the activists also need international support, which is what you are trying to attain through this discussion, through the documentary, and through the musical contribution. And I really appreciate this, because now this is the time when we must realize that the climate change cannot be just discussed in the various international summits and conferences. We have to adopt a very different strategy to save the land and all resources that the communities are living upon, because those are the communities who have really protected the unselfish and simplicity-based, self-reliance-based lifestyles. And if that is destroyed, the whole natural ecosystem and the earth will also face destruction. 1,500 scientists are always warning us that the species are being destroyed and the earth is under attack. So whether we really can believe that this kind of land grab and change in the land use patterns to whatever new occupations, including tourism, which is declared as industry, will really lead to the protection of nature and protection of human community? No. The answer is no. And hence the land grab must be wholly and solely opposed, not only for saving the communities, but saving the humanity as well. And hence we support the researchers' appeal and recommendations to the companies which come into being, that you should not move forward without ensuring the land rights to the local residents. We must appeal to the United Nations. We reach out to, saying that, look, if your conventions and covenants are violated by the nation states that have already ratified, we will have to take our battles to your doorstep as well. Just as after WTO, we had fought in Geneva with the alliance of people's movements across the world. We must build such kind of strong international alliance today, because the corporate world is really pushing our politicians also beyond of or against the ideology of equity and justice, and also ideology of the development paradigm, which will be based on sustainable and just ways and choices of technology. So I think the Sri Lankan battle is very, very critical today. And when the military is forcing itself on the land, we cannot take to armed struggle, but we certainly have to resort to the various forms of peaceful satyagraha, which can be won only with the strong mass strength. And for that, whatever efforts you all in Sri Lanka are doing and taking to with the media, but also with the mass mobilization and organization, we support it. And when the eminent Justice Vigneshwaranji is with us, I'm sure that the judiciary, as one of the pillars of democracy, also will be knocked at the doorstep doors and will be motivated, if not compelled, to give judgments that can certainly save the communities which have already faced 3 decades long civil war. But this war will be the end of humankind if that continues in Sri Lanka and in other nation states. So we are with you. We welcome the documentary makers and the musical concert makers, and we also support you. And do let us know how can we raise this issue beyond the today's panel discussion, and how can the international force in favor of, in support and solidarity of the Sri Lankan displaced populations that are facing hell of violence of a new kind can also be extended by us. Thank you very much, and sorry if I've taken a little longer time. I had found it difficult to concentrate on the points and the analysis. It's raining in cats and dogs here, and I'm sitting in a car and interacting with you. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patkar. I mean, it's really an honor for us to have you join us here today, and you've offered a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge. And so there's so many questions coming in for us to ask you. I don't know if you have time to answer 2 questions, but yeah, I think,
please ask 1 or 2 questions. I will take.
Yeah, sure. So the first question.
I have 10 more minutes.
Yeah, so we'll ask you quickly. So the first question is, can you please advise us on how to ask the grassroots organizations in Sri Lanka to build a working relationship with organizations like yours to work together to stop land grabs?
In today's situation, unfortunately, we are pushed into the online communications only. So at least that must take place. I know that our unit in Tamil Nadu with Geeta Ramakrishnan, Arul Das and others are with the today's Tamil Nadu government, which is more sensitive to such issues as acquisition, accumulation of wealth, or inequity and injustice. And I think there can be a communication with not only the people's movements in Tamil Nadu that are fighting for the justice to Dalits, and also to the Tamilians in Sri Lanka. I have attended certain programs which really had shaken me up when I could see the photographs. And when we visited Mahavali, I know that the very starched, white clothed, displaced people were put up before us by the Sri Lankan government. And they all said to our World Commission on Dams, which I was one of the commissioners in, that they were very, very happy with the resettlement. And then the Kader Asmal from South Africa, who was chairing the commission, he said, Medhaji, now you move forward and you ask your question. And I just asked one question to them as to whether they were very, very badly affected and in a very bad plight when they were in their original villages. I said, you must be facing hell there. That's why you are happy in the new side. Then they took over and they said that, no, we were very happy with our original community. So this kind of difference is pressed and kind of suppressed by the government forces, the rulers, and all those who profit from such projects. So I think the youngsters who may be asking this question must move into communities first within Sri Lanka, but also a team can visit Tamil Nadu and India, and then we can spread this message about what is happening there and the analysis of the militarized attacks on the Tamil communities. And I hope that you will also build relationships with some progressive elements within the Sinhala community. You will also build interactions with Anuradha kind of researchers, and then that can be an international thing. So do write to us. We can issue statements with thousands of signatures from the Indians, not just Tamilians, but all of us. And I think we can be an international force in that way.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. And one final question is, what is your advice to maintain the longevity of this movement against land grabs and occupation in the Tamil homeland. You've spoken at great length about the need for us to be strong as a community and for us to engage different sources and different sorts of experiences. But how do we ensure that this movement is long lasting and gets passed on to the future generations?
I think the main force in the movement that gives us a sustainability is the women's force. And we realize that when the women have kind of, a very long-term and deep-rooted contribution to the movement, they cannot easily compromise, even during the challenging situations. And on the other hand, their impact on the opponents, on the rulers, on the power holders of different kinds goes a long way. And they cannot withdraw as the men do in different situations. So I think the women, and the second is the youth. Youth have the special energy, and hence our kind of old activists look forward to the young force who also have the various weapons in their hand, non-violent weapons I'm talking about, like the social media, for example, and they can use it better than us. Let them do it. It is like picking a thorn with a thorn. Otherwise, we don't appreciate the online and Googleization. But I think that is also needed today to really question whatever is happening in human way. And also for the longevity, I think the struggle and reconstruction, both kinds of programs must be pushed. Otherwise, if we are merely in struggles, that doesn't build up the real perspective and the paradigm, which is an alternative paradigm in our mind, socially, economically, culturally. And I think that can be saved by the Tamilians who were always for ThaaiNilam. But now without military war, if they can highlight these cultural traditions, that will also build a force which will last long. Thank you, Abhiram.
Thank you so much, Dr. Medha Patkar ji, for your time, for your expertise, and for standing in solidarity with this movement.
Pleasure and privilege.